my dudes, dudettes and dudems. So just FYI, this video is going to be a bit of a spoiler, so if you haven't finished Persona 5 or Persona 5 Royal and planning to do so, then please don't blame me on spoiling you if you continue forwards. Thanks! Right, so one side is covered in Worbla for now, so it looks like this, and yeah, it's the start, so you know, let's say it's still like in the ugly duckling stage more or less, but it's already starting to look cool. But you know how it is, like the funny part is that like if it's just one side Worbla, it's still floppy as heck, so but hey, got it. Okay, so that's where I am right now. So one side is covered in Worbla and it's still floppy because, you know, just one side plastic, but yeah, it's starting to look like something, which you know, I basically started with like the back side. So let's say what is, well, technically the front. I mean, like both of those sides are gonna be kind of same-ish. But I like carving my sheet because, you know, like you can't really get everything down with painting. Like it's not as 3D as I like, so carving it is. And then everything else. And it's very much 3D later, and I want this to look like an absolute spawn of Satan. So I think we're heading in the right direction. That's a small pro tip before I forget. What is very, very helpful when it comes to working with Worbla and like covering Eva foam with it. You see the edges in here? I basically used fine grit Dremel end for this because, you know, like let's say if you do this on not too high speed and like with very fine grit, so for example I use the same tips as I use for nails, so you know, like let's say this is like kinda stuff for salons, but at the same time it's cheaper, and you know, like you can get them like in bigger packets and stuff. But if you use it on places like this that are rather hard to reach and stuff like this, it's going to help you immensely when it comes to closing the edges, right? Because, you know, like see at the top it's still kind of messy, right? But like that's how it looks at first, and after you do the streak that I mentioned, it's going to be much easier to even this out later. And also good thing is that like if you don't do this on high speed or like the lower ones, the rotation also gives it a bit of heat, so it's also easier to even out. So as you can see, this basically stuck to Eva foam quite well, so I won't have to worry about you know, like using any other tools when adding the other side on top. So yeah, so this still needs to be dremeled, but pretty happy how it's going. Here the blade part is basically finished, so it's fully sculpted and covered in thermoplastic. Although as you can see, it's still a bit floppy, so that's something that's gonna be fixed later after adding layers of wood glue that basically serves as base and primer in one. So handle next, and as you can see, I added a small piece of Eva foam to like kind of make it more stable. Then I will flip it, make sure that it's like heated a bit, and you know, like formats a bit, and then add the other side. So sandwich time. I gotta say I'm quite happy with how the form came out, the sculpting part and so on, but you can see that next to the reference it seems a tiny bit different, because the reference that I have is something that was published on Twitter, so I have to say a big thank you for people that made it available, because that made my job so much easier, so thanks again, and I will do my best to credit them. But the spikes itself seemed a little too simple, if that makes sense. So I just kind of made sure to make them look a bit more hellish and angry, let's say, because that just makes more sense, or at least did in my head. But honestly, this whole sword looks a bit like a bone saw, so I kinda figured that it would make more sense to make it look a bit more creepy or ghoulish. So on to the sculpting the handle, and honestly I expected this to be a bit more tricky than it turned out to be, although it's not an easy shape. So just in case if you're going to want to replicate this sword and you struggle on this part, don't feel bad about this, because it's like one of those things that if it wasn't from my years of experience with sculpting and building props, etc., I'm pretty sure that I would struggle much more than I did in here. But honestly I was really surprised that it went quite smoothly. Also note both the blade and the handle part are made out of foam that is pretty high density, so it's one of those things that wouldn't squish easily in hand. So it might not be the easiest to bend and shape, but it's definitely very good when it comes to using Dremel or just different ways of carving in this foam in general. The idea to make the swords have been tailing me for a couple of years at this point, to be honest, but kind of recently I made myself one of Akechi's skins as a sort of comfy cosplay to run around conventions and just be able to vibe with my friends, but also still have something to wear. So basically I went for the fresh Goro skin, as I dubbed it. But honestly I wanted to have another prop for him for photoshoots and stuff, because I was planning to shoot with Joker sooner than later. I really wanted to have one of his swords, and honestly thinking about this, the choice was kinda obvious, because it might not be his strongest weapon in the game, although the Black Mask sword is definitely the one that is most recognizable. And honestly the design by itself looks the most fun to make, so that's what I wanted to tackle for quite a while, but didn't really have time or enough brain cells to just sit down and do it, let's say, until one day I was just like, you know what, I'm going to Poznań Game Arena soon and I would love to have that photo shoot that I planned for a while. It would be great to have the sword for Akechi, so I sat down and made it in circa 3 days, I think. Honestly, that was also a way for me to cope with a depressive episode that I was and I'm still basically going through. But cosplay is one of those things that really helps me cope in general and just feel better about myself and stuff, because being creative is definitely a big part of a healing process, if that makes sense. So yeah, I guess I'm channeling my anger by making angry props, so or rather putting this restless energy to use by making something, and this being a prop that I wanted to have for a while being a very sweet bonus on top of it. So those grey patches that you see on the handle right now are foam clay, because fortunately or not, it's kind of unavoidable to have little places in your build that will need filling up, so like either by acrylic filler or whatever you like to use, although in this case I just decided to go with foam clay because it's the easiest to patch Eva foam with foam clay, and honestly just means the best, and it's the easiest to mask later. As for the ridges on the handle, it's definitely one of the trickier parts of this build to get this right, although I guess it counts with any attempt to translate a 2D build into something 3D, that there's plenty of basically eyeballing this stuff and filling in the blanks with whatever makes sense in your head as you go. So to get it as close to the reference pictures as possible, I just basically had like the 1:1 scaled version of this cut out, so I made small cuts in the places where the ridges are, filled it with a marker or a Sharpie if you will, and then just basically connecting the lines between the front and back and made sure that it makes sense and is symmetrical. Here you can see which bit I used for the Dremel for carving this stuff, although honestly don't quote me on this, I'm usually like the type of person to just try whatever I have at hand on, you know, like on a stray piece of foam or something and see if that actually makes sense, and if it doesn't, just go with this. So I am in no way a professional on being able to tell you like, oh, this is grid XYZ etc. There's more eyeballing this stuff than actual knowledge in here, if you know what I mean. But hey, it usually works out, so I guess I'm doing something right. hopefully. I use an extender for Dremel to be able to get into small spaces or achieve those smaller details as you can see in here. To be honest, you can try doing this if you just have the base Dremel, but I wouldn't really recommend it, as that would definitely be much harder to achieve, plus that would definitely be something that would put much bigger strain on your wrist, as this can literally take hours. I have no clue how long it's been in here, although we can safely bet that I didn't spend 1 or 2 hours on doing the whole sword. That was definitely longer than this. I am very bad at telling the amount of time I've spent on something, but I would say solid couple of hours were just figuring the shape and stuff, so yeah. Even if you're also able to basically laser focus on something the same as I do, when the inspiration kicks in, it doesn't mean that you should disregard your body, so that should really come first. And by all means, please remember to take breaks every at least couple of hours. Stand up, take a little walk, you know, stretch a bit, especially when working with power tools. That's one of the things that I've been working on for the last couple of years, and I have to admit that it really helped me when it comes to pacing myself and not getting burnt out as badly between projects. I think I must have forgotten to take the footage of doing that, but after finishing with carving the handle, what I did was heat seal the foam, because that's basically a step that you don't want to forget about, especially if you're going to seal the surface and paint it later. And that's also what helps to keep the already carved shape in place, and a pass with a heat gun on lower heat is definitely enough to achieve that. When it comes to preparing a surface for painting, there's one solid piece of advice that I can give you guys, and one is that I usually use rather smaller brushes, and regardless of what material I'm using currently, be it wood glue or flex bond or any other one, what I usually do, especially with the water-based substances, is quite often I would add a bit of water to it, just just to be able to control the consistency of the thing as I go. So it's bloody 7:30 already, although the other side is also covered in vehicle already, so I will just leave it to dry for now and do other stuff, but yeah, 7:30. So that's how the sword was looking after a whole day for it being left to dry and settle. So the next step was obviously the sanding, although as I mentioned previously, thanks to watering down the base and applying it rather carefully, there was no need to use anything else other than low grit sandpaper and some water, so that definitely made the job much easier. Another thing you can see me doing in here, and I think it's a pretty nice pro tip, is to use either a paper towel or a rag and occasionally just wipe the surface that you're working on. It just makes assessing the surface easier and the whole sanding job just turns out cleaner. Next I moved on to applying the base colors, and in this case it was the easiest and fastest to use spray paints, although I don't like the colors turning out flat, so going for spray paint is also the easiest way of making the fade look nice and the whole paint job looking a bit more 3D. I went to a designated area for painting outside in our workshop, but it's an outdoor corner, but I can't stress enough how important it is not to do any spray painting in a house, especially in a place where you can't properly ventilate it, so don't spray inside, kiddos, please. Once the spray painting was done, I had a break and then came back to it later to just use acrylics, and in this case, and I think these are my favorite ones whenever I can afford to use them, those are water-based acrylics. Brand is named Cosplay, and you can get them in Cosplay Shop BE. And to be completely transparent, I do have a nice discount with them, although I do pay for my own supplies, so take it as you wish, but this is very much a conscious choice. I absolutely love those paints, and they might be a bit pricey, although they are definitely very high quality and they are worth the money. Compared to a lot of different brands that I used over the years, I can highly recommend those. Hi, hello, in a true ADHD fashion, we're having a time skip in here, because I got stuck on this video for a solid couple of months, and to be completely honest, it wasn't exactly fully under my control, if that makes sense. But since I was able to come back to it finally, I have to thank the tutorial challenge, because that's what finally gave me motivation to come back to finish this piece. Well, and since I already started on the subject of having to take a break from this video, or rather sort of being halted from finishing the video as originally planned, I guess this is a good thought to sort of wrap up this video, because it gave me a bit of insight on how some builds just simply need to have some time to either mature or like for us to properly appreciate them, or maybe sometimes it's better to just postpone posting something or actually putting this together until we have a bit of more experience or like a bit more footage or pictures to just like show up for this. Because to be completely honest with you, for quite a few months I wasn't really happy with the fact that I cannot really find any time or energy to craft, because there's just been a lot of stuff happening, and then my health wasn't exactly the best, so that also took a couple of months out of like the quote-unquote agenda, let's say. But from Toy's perspective, it was actually a pretty cool experience to be able to just take out the sword for a couple of photo shoots, for a couple of conventions, just, you know, have some shenanigans with my friends and like other fellow Persona fans that basically found me through this sword just being displayed, like in the crafting corner at the Deco, for example, here in Dresden in Germany. And I don't know, it's like, you know, this like silly little prop that I made for myself, but at the same time it gave me so much joy just to be able to make it, which was one thing, but also a lot of joy afterwards, just enjoying the fact that I finally have this prop and I can just use it however the heck I want to either make content or just, you know, like connect with other people, gather some interesting thoughts on, you know, like how to approach those builds, and maybe, you know, like a couple of people also gave me a couple of ideas how to make those even better. So I guess this is like one of those that just started as a silly little thing for me to sort of vent my frustrations in a positive way, or like channel negative energy in a positive way and sort of unwind, but then ended up being even more than that, which is actually really cool. And with me putting this video together at the end of March next year already, so 2024, I can tell you that sometimes it's really good to just have some patience with yourself as a person, because, you know, when it comes to us being cosplayers or artists or however you want to call yourself, sometimes we try to be super creative or like super productive, or, you know, like that's definitely always been my problem, that I would basically drive myself up the wall thinking that I should, you know, like I should be making more stuff, I should be putting more stuff together, and why is this thing A, B, C and Z not done yet? But at the same time, I know that like quite often this thing or like this crazy schedule that I would love to impose on myself is not entirely humanly possible when it comes together with my actual physical abilities at the moment, especially since there was really a lot passing in my life at the same time. So I won't get into like very personal stuff or anything like this, because it just doesn't make sense in here, but I think what I'm trying to say is that it's really good to have like a bit of hyperfixation or something, especially if it's like a cosplay project or something like this, that helps us channel like negative energy into positive things, like in this case. Because like from my perspective, I think this is literally what keeps me sane at times, when I'm feeling overwhelmed with everything that's passing like in my life or like with world in general. And maybe it is, you know, like it is a bit of escapism, but at the same time I don't think it's in any way harmful or in any way counterproductive, and like quite the contrary, right? So having a little hyperfixation, like my thing with Persona for example, is kind of really good to have, to come back to it and just take a breather, because if that's something that produces the positive chemicals in our brain, it's definitely something worth cherishing, rather than being like, oh, I should be concentrating on, you know, like more popular things, or I should be making something that people are going to like pay more attention to, or the algorithm is gonna pay more attention to. But honestly, coming from someone who's been in this hobby since 2007, more or less, I can tell you that this is really not a healthy way of thinking, and honestly it's always much better to just concentrate on something that you're making for yourself and going to really enjoy, rather than try to please the crowds, because that's not really gonna work that well in the long way, at least definitely not for your own mental health. So TLDR, remember to take care of yourself, guys, and happy crafting. I hope this little video of mine would give you a nice tip or two that you can use in your own crafts, and hope to see you again. Ciao!